Hi, everybody. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm BJ. I'm the genealogy specialist at Maine State Library. And while we're closed for the pandemic, I figured I would do a bunch of these online meetings. I admit that I hate being in front of the camera, so it's taken some convincing myself to do it, but I'm getting there on being comfortable with the technology and all of that. What I'm going to do today is I actually put the names of several countries I've never worked in a little cup and picked one out. And I'm literally going to go through the way I would do things if I found that either one of my ancestors or a patron's ancestor was in a country where I'd never done any work before. So obviously the things you're going to be looking for are pretty typical of genealogy. A lot of what you're looking at is going to be the same. You're going to be looking for original records. You're going to be looking, working from what you know back, going back, and so on. But every political jurisdiction does things a little differently. So the first thing I do, let me share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So I know there are a lot of librarians who are not that fond of Wikipedia, and teachers certainly aren't. But for something like this, it's actually a very good place to start. And so if I type in Netherlands, I get that. And I'm going to look for a couple things here. Part of it is political, and part of it is sociological or demographic. First of all, if you don't know exactly where a country is, there will be a map that highlights the country. So this tells me that the Netherlands are kind of in the middle of everything that happened in Europe, probably, and that there probably was coastal trade and so on. And that it's, the two big neighbors close by are Germany, which if you remember, Germany was not a unified country until the 1880s, and France, which tended to be fairly turbulent. So, and then you've also got Denmark and the UK as nearby neighbors. So that's giving me a little information right there. Here it tells me that the official language is Dutch, which is something we're going to hold on to and put back, come back to it later. One of the drawbacks of this is that it's giving you current information, not historic. But what this is telling me, looking at let me blow this up a little so you can see it. So anyway, official language Dutch. So that tells you the records are likely to be in Dutch. Under religion, they're giving you the modern. So I'm going to ignore the half the country that claims that they're non-religious. And of the others that are left, it looks like it's slightly weighted towards being Catholic rather Reformed or Lutheran. But that you're going to traditionally, in this case, find records, I expect, that are both Catholic and Protestant. And that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes you'll get one of these where it says 95% of the country is Catholic, or 79% is Lutheran. And so that's going to help you with knowing where to look beyond the basic records. The other thing I look for that's kind of political, there are two things. One is, what is the internal structure? And here it tells us there are 12 provinces. And if you click on that, or if you hover the cursor over it, it actually gives you, I'll open a new window so we can see, here's a map of the provinces. And so, oops, let's go back. It gives me an idea that, you know, these are probably the equivalent of somewhere between states and counties in the US in terms of internal structure. And each of these will link to an article about that province. So if we look at, let's look at, I don't know how this is pronounced, Drenthe. If we click there, it says, you know, it's sparsely populated rural area, and usually there's a demographics link. Tells you the most populated city, some historical data. Sometimes the demographics will tell you the religion for at the province or state level. And that there is a local dialect that you may run into issues with. But let's go back to the overall Netherlands. So the internal structure is one of the things I'm looking at. And the other thing I'm looking for is this. It's basically had the same political structure now since 1848. And that can be helpful just in terms of knowing, you know, did you have turbulent governments? If you look at the same information for France, there's several different things turning over, and that may have an impact on the records. So let's go down and click on demographics. So it gives you the population. It's fairly densely populated. And you want to scroll down and look for, again, here's a bit on the language, more on the religion. This is where you may find details for the historic religion, rather than just the current. And it may give you the name of the established church, which is the Protestant church in the Netherlands. And gives you a little bit of history. So the royal family was Protestant, so that's going to be a bit of information you want to put in your head, there may be cases where you find records in that church that aren't, that maybe people who didn't go to that church because it was official, that's where they have the records. So that's the first thing I do. Yeah, this is interesting. Like, it gives you an idea. Here's a population density map. And you can see along the coast is where it's most dense. And up here is that one province we looked at that was much less densely populated. But again, it gives you an idea that, you know, this is where most of the people would have been from, and you're going to find fewer farmers here than up here, for example. So just something to be aware of. The next place I go after checking Wikipedia is I go to the Family Search Wiki. And again, this is crowdfunded, crowdsourced, the same way that Wikipedia is. There are some volunteers at the library in Salt Lake City who, especially on the higher level, like country level articles, do actually do some developing. So we'll go to Europe and we'll go to the link on the Netherlands. And this is one reason I do this next. There are bits about getting started, and there are things by record type. They give you some information. They're civil registrations kept at the local level, which means maybe those provinces don't mean much after all if it was the town that kept the records. There's a Finding Town of Origin article, and let's open that. And you will have specific information here about places you might find that information. It looks like there are some nationwide indexes, some passenger lists. So again, list of provinces with a link to each province's page. So let's go to this same province we went to at Wikipedia. And this tells you you're going to have civil registration, church records, and population registers. Okay, and then they talk about, here's when civil registration began in 1811 when the Netherlands were under French rule. Tells you the most recent you can see for privacy reasons. Gives you births, marriages, anything in addition to the marriage supplements and deaths. There's a whole article on Netherlands Southern civil registration that you would want to read. And for example, here's the website of the archives. Now, one reason I like using Google Chrome is if I go here, this is in Dutch, it gives me the option of it translating. Now, it's usually not great, it's machine translation, but it gives you enough information so that, for example, I probably could have guessed that Voornaam, or not, I don't know how it's pronounced, was forename, which means that this other one that ends nam is probably surname. But, and that, period, you can figure out is going to be dates because, they also have dates in there. And then given those bits of information, you're probably going to guess that this is, and then there's a drop down. So it's going to be the town name. But it is nice to have the option to translate it and find out that, plots means place. Makes sense, doesn't it? But you can also see they've divided things up by time, 3 time periods. Looks like there's some poor law records that they've got. And we can look, so obviously we haven't figured out quite yet what the population registers are, but we'll get back to that. So, it's worth looking. So this looks interesting. So here's the population registers. Let's open up that and go, wow, if that's what this is, they track the movement of people from one residence to another. In theory, they began in 1850. Some places had them earlier. It's not a census, which records a population at a specific, it's a snapshot. This is meant to track people as it changes. So when you move, this changes. And so they have both population registers and a census. So let's take a look. Let's go back to the archives. And the population registers. And let's see, let's just try. I'm putting in names. So let's see what we've got. Now this is nice. It looks like this is available for free. So let's take a look. We'll go into the scan. And obviously this does not get translated, but it's telling us, well, family name, I think you can figure out, right? Forename. And I'm guessing, looking at these, that this means birth date. Even if I can't read Dutch, that's probably a birth date. What else are they? So this is a case where you'd want to then do some Googling of what these things mean, or use Google Translate. But that's really handy, isn't it? So this looks like it's the date and year, because I'm looking over here. So we have date and year of birth. And I have a feeling that inscribing probably means when it was written or inscribed. And this looks like maybe it's where they've moved. I can't tell. But that looks like it's going to be a really useful record set if I'm looking for somebody's great-grandmother in the late 1800s in the Netherlands. They've got this, so we've got the Dutch alphabet. Let's look at the Dutch words. This is actually a link to a course they run. Oh, and I don't have the right, so it looks like there's a video. Tips for finding your ancestor. So, just so far, my impression is that the Netherlands is going to have fairly decent records. I'm not seeing things like destroyed in the war, or these records were never kept, or they're held locally and nobody can get their hands on them because the clerk wants $100 per entry, or any of those things that I have seen for other parts of Europe. So I'm going with this sounds like it's going to be a relatively easy place to research. So let's go back here to the overall Dutch page. And again, here's, instead of that whole video, I'm guessing this is just a list because it says list. And it has keywords. So city is Stadt, father is Vater, husband is Mann. So these are the basic ones. And then they do the numbers and months and such. They list the occupations. This is a nice one to have pulled out because it looks like these are the, you know, you've got farmer, baker, brewer, and so on. And then a bit about the language itself. And then here's the alphabetical word list. And so if you find a word you don't know, you can come and look and say, well, bedelaar is a beggar, if that's mentioned for your ancestor. Or, you know, overgrootvader is great grandfather. So that's helpful, and it looks like this is a fairly extensive list. So, you know, that would be, and then they also have, I wonder if this is going to go back to those videos. No. Here's a, looks like this was done for some conference, but you can, it gives you some examples of what's going to be in the records and some samples of the handwritten version. I'm kind of beginning to wish I had some ancestors in the Netherlands with how good these records seem to be. And so, you know, I would, if I were starting this, the first ones I would check out would be the census, church records, and vital records. And then I would look and see if there's anything where I'd go, that's not something I've worked with before. I wonder what it is. So looking at this, the two that I would pick out for that would be the notarial records and the population registers. And so those 5 categories are the ones I would work my way through before I really started looking. The others probably can wait until you think you need them. But those are the ones, as I said, it's going to be the census, it's the church records, and vital records. Now, in this case, it looks like they have vital records, which probably actually covers civil registration. But I know that in a lot of Europe, like in Quebec, the notarial records are very important. So that's one you want to look and see if that's. And if you haven't gone to Wikipedia first, they also have some of the background here. The other nice thing is they do list archives and societies, and this is probably someone who, you know, is affiliated with the family. You know, the moderators for this tend to be people affiliated with the Family History Library. but it does show you that somebody is looking over this to make sure that people don't make malicious changes. So let's look, archives and libraries. So there's a national archive, there's regional and municipal, and it's going to tell you what's essentially at each level of the archive structure. There are church archives. It does tell you that church records after 1811 tend to be kept by the local parish. You can write to them. And this gets us genealogical societies. There are a couple big ones. And they tell you, this one does have some fees, gives you the address and the website. And don't overlook the historical society as well as the genealogical. For this is interesting that there's a New Netherlands project that's actually based in the US that for early Dutch settlers in the New York area might be the place to start. Gives you an idea of what the records are going to be under at the Family History Library, at Family Search. So and again, we get the introduction to the population register. They tell you how it changed over time. Those of you who did my census 3-parter remember how things changed as they got more bureaucratic. It looks like the same thing happened here. So the next thing I would do with Family Search, I would go to the catalog and go by place. And again, put in that. One reason I chose that province is I knew I'd remember how to spell it. And search by that and see if what they've got, to see if there's something here that's not indexed easily. This would take a while to go through, but it's worth taking a look to see, exactly what church records do they have. And are they, let's scroll down. They're online and they are indexed. So you don't have to go frame by frame in a microfilm, which is helpful. But this is, for anywhere you're working, you want to take a look at this. And then one of the nice things I like is that they have the bigger political unit it's a member of. And if you're looking and you can't remember an exact place name, you can do this and go, oh, yeah. Oh, wait a minute, is it Amen or Emin? Then you need to look. But it gives you the places, these are all the smaller units. These are the municipalities in the province. And so if you go to Emin and it would give you that list. Okay. The other place I would go early on is Cindy's list. And you want to look under categories. And under Netherlands. And again, she's got some pretty standard subcategories she does. But again, you have language, names, handwriting, and script, libraries and archives, maps and geography. Are there better maps than what we looked at Wikipedia that really break down the way the Ordnance Survey does in the UK or the USGS does in the US? Information about births, marriages, and deaths. Let's look, since I've started that, let's look at population registers. So there are some things to look at how you use them as a source, and then also links to the actual records. The other thing I would do, with this one, we found a good word list from the Family Search wiki page, but it's probably Dutch genealogy terms or words would get you. Here's one from a Dutch source. Cat, that's not going to work. Sorry about this. Scouts decided to join us. The other thing I would take a look for, and I don't know if there is one, is Dutch genealogy blog. So looks like there's one here. Tracing your Dutch roots. So there may be people writing about working in the Netherlands. So here's that name list. Nowhere near as extensive as the one we found at Family Search. Oops. Come on. But it does look like this Dutch genealogy.nl has is in English and has some information about searching in the Netherlands, with news and free, list of free websites. So it's worth seeing if someone's writing about Dutch ancestors. Oops. Where did it go? Sorry about that, guys. So that's the range of what I do to get started. At this point, I would start trying to actually deal with individual people and seeing if I could find them. But a lot of this, when you start a new area, it is worth taking the time to do some of this because, if you look for census records, but not, but don't look for population registers because you don't know they exist, you're missing a big chunk of where the information may be for somebody living in the Netherlands. Does that make sense to everybody? Why it's worth investing a little time when you're starting in a new place? I love Ancestry, as I'm sure most of you have figured out. It's a wonderful resource, but the downside of Ancestry is that it means that people often jump in without doing some of the background research, and you end up spending extra time looking for things that don't exist or not looking at records that would make your life much easier. So, when I do start in a new area, which happens periodically, especially when I'm helping patrons or working on friends' genealogy. It really is worth taking an hour or two to do some of this. I've got it down where I can do a lot of this within the hour or two. It probably takes some of you a little longer, but between Cindy's List and the Family Search Wiki, it's pretty well packaged for us now. You're not looking randomly. The people who have done these websites have done a lot of the work for you. You don't have to go looking for a definition of exactly what's covered in a population register. They tell you. Does that make sense? But yes, you're looking for the information, but it's been packaged for you. It comes close to being the convenience food of genealogy research. So where's the chat window? Let me stop the sharing for a minute. Yeah. Yeah, and town histories are an excellent place to go. But again, that's part of the assessing, where are the records kept? Are they kept at a local level, or are they kept at a county level? Or were things nationalized the way they were in 1837, where in England, where you have local registration offices, but the records we now get are the ones that were sent to London. Everything was sent to London. So that's a really important thing to take a look at. So any questions at this point? So yeah, as I said, the biggest two sites are the Family Search Wiki, which I always go find by typing Family Search Wiki into Google. For some reason, I've just never. And Cindy's List. And Cindy's List has been around since before Google, and there's a reason for that, because she does a really good job of curating things and putting things into categories. As I said, I also try to add the step before of looking at the Wikipedia that is for everything, not just genealogy, so that I don't get so focused on, this is how the genealogy records are organized. Is there some other thing going on? And getting an idea of, when the country started, how it's made up, and especially the religious breakdown, because that's going to affect where. And I don't often see that religious breakdown at the Family Search Wiki, and never at Cindy's List, which is one reason I've started going to Wikipedia, because when you get into dealing with Europe, continental Europe, particularly in that central area that is from eastern France through to western Poland, where you get, in Germany, it went by each little principality, whether they stayed Catholic or became Lutheran. And knowing which one is which is always a tough, it makes a difference in finding the right records. So that's something. Okay, so I'm going to put the link. Somebody asked about, and I will email this out as well. In the chat, I'm going to put, that's the link to where I'm putting all of the recording links for this. I may, if it begins to get too long, I may do, here's everything from March and April, and then do a new one for May, so you don't have to search so hard. But at this point, I'm just putting them all in one, so that they're literally all at one page. So let's see. Any other questions? And if you'd rather unmute yourself and ask it with your voice instead of the chat, for those of you who don't know, if you put your cursor over the pictures, you'll get a toolbar at the bottom, and you unmute yourself with the leftmost toolbar. So, any other questions?
Good morning.
Good morning. Any questions?
I'm new to this. The second or third time I've used Zoom.
A month ago, I didn't know how to use it. So, we're all in this together.
I believe we are. My daughter-in-law out in California. She works for UCLA in Riverside, and she's saying that Zoom is changing every day. They're doing updates, and she says it's like a learning experience every day.
Yeah.
Basically almost start over again. So she's a little frustrated with it, but gaining on it. I have a quick question as far as
Sure.
your Zoom itself. If I take and I've reduced the size of the screen of your screen, and if I look underneath it, it says connect with us, and there's several different places that we can go with this. In other words, if I were to choose right now, and if I could put this on Facebook, would it go, or do you have to do that?
I think I have to do that. I don't know for certain, but yet the links page is if you want, has the links to the recordings. So that's where I put that in the chat, and I'll send it out in the email that I send out as well, so that you can, and feel free to share the link to the recording. I'm more than happy to have people share the links to the recordings. I'm doing these, a lot of places do, they charge for webinars and such, especially the recording. A lot of places also, you can watch live, but if you don't catch it, you have to pay to access it. But I'm a state employee. I'm doing this as part of my job. So I'm happy to have people share out, because as I've joked with many of you before, I'm half Scots and half New England Yankee, and appreciate being able to do frugal genealogy. But I also really I'm, as I said earlier, as much as I like Ancestry, it really encourages people to jump in without doing some background research. And I can tell both from my own experience in working with patrons over the last few years, I can tell you it definitely pays off to do this background research when you start in a new area, or even a new ethnic group. Even if I'd done research in Pennsylvania, if I suddenly found myself researching the Pennsylvania Dutch, Amish, Mennonite brethren, I would do some of this for that group. Obviously, some of what I already know about Pennsylvania would work, but how do they keep records? Or, if I were to do Boston Irish, my research in Boston has all been in Protestant records. So how are the Catholic records kept? And I will tell you, those of you who are, if you have Boston Irish or other Boston Catholic ancestors. The Archdiocese of Boston is working with the New England Historical and Genealogical Society, and they have their parish records coming, historic parish records. I think it's up to 100 years ago, coming online at the rate of about a parish a week. At New American Ancestors, which at the State Library, we do have a subscription to that. So you can come in and use our subscription, because that's, it's a wonderful trove of records that, if you have anyone who was in Eastern Massachusetts, that will really help. Yeah, Pam, great comment that it may, doing some of the location background research may help people figure out why somebody moved, why they didn't move. There are things like, again, I haven't done much German research, but parts of what is now Germany into the 1800s had guilds that controlled who could get married. And so that may well have prompted people to leave if they were at the outskirts of society and would not get permission to marry. That may have driven them to leave. France from 1790 to the 1880s had, I don't know how many different governments with republic and monarchy and Bonaparte, and that all has an effect on whether people want to stay. So doing some of that background research really can help on that. Question? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a couple questions. Just a quick one. The State Library has a record. Is that a membership to the New England Genealogy Society?
Yeah, the New England Historical Genealogical Society. Their website is AmericanAncestors.org.
American Ancestors, okay. And the other question is out to the group. I saw that some people were saying that they're researching their German area. I was just going to throw this out if anybody is researching Munster, Westphalia.
Yeah.
No, okay.
So we'll see if anyone is doing the Munster, Westphalia area. Sounds like Diane's doing research there too, so you can.
And I also, when you said, most of my research actually is in the Boston area. So you said that the Archdiocese of Boston is collaborating with the New England Genealogy Society. Is that right? Is that,
yeah.
So in order to see those records through the diocese, you would have to go into the New England Historical.
Well, their website is AmericanAncestors.org.
Okay.
And yeah, for until they started this project, it was almost impossible to get your hands on Boston area records. They were in the diocesan archives and you just couldn't. And somehow they finally agreed to let American Ancestors digitize them. And it's pretty impressive how much they've done.
BJ, this is
Yes.
Nancy. There was a webinar yesterday that Diane would be interested in. The librarian at I call it the HisGen Boston,
Yeah.
American Ancestors. Librarian yesterday gave an excellent webinar where she dissected the resources by what you can access through a guest entry into their website versus a member. And when you were mentioning a minute ago that the library has a membership, and in the meantime, until we can access that, if you go on AmericanAncestors.org and look for guest sign-in, look for the webinar that was conducted yesterday by the librarian. And I believe you can watch the webinars at no cost. There are a lot of things that they have now listed up there, and they do have a whole study project listed as such, a study project on the Catholic Archdiocese records.
Mhm.
And you can also get onto some of their alerts so that you can ask them to send you an email every time they have posted new materials. But they did a tremendous job yesterday outlining what was free and what was not. And that webinar would be worth it. I'll look for a link, BJ, and send it to you, and you can post it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking to see if I can find it.
Oh, good. Okay, I think it
But I'm
went
not-
yesterday after the program was over. And they also conduct a lot of webinars that are accessible at no cost. And then their courses, even though it is $125 from some of their courses, they can go on for 8 weeks and give tremendous information. They also allow you to come back in and replay them, and also to access the archives that they create from that. So Diane, it may be really helpful. And I also believe they have a study project on German records. And they have several other study projects. I've been a member for about 35 years, and I can get something new every single time I turn on. I did want to give an alert, and this is not meant to be against something that's happening, but there is an organization that has just surfaced up in the Machias area called New England Historical Society. And they are a group of folks that like to write articles, and they are gleaning records and going through and writing articles. They are not a historical society, and I took them to task on that because it's very misleading. And the articles they're posting can be very informative, but they're also not accurate. And they are citing things very, very broadly rather than specific citations. They're doing very broad citations. And in my own research, I bumped into them because I wanted to refer them to somebody. And when I read the article I was about to refer, I sat down and wrote to this group and said, can you please beware? Even their logo looks like the HistGen logo. So I don't think it's by accident. So if any of y'all here are involved in that, my apologies, but do beware of it. And maybe BJ, you could check it out and give some advice on it, because the information would be very misleading in many cases if you're trying to use it for DAR or any other source. So there, my 2 cents worth.
Okay.
And this was
Okay.
awesome. I really thank you for delving into these resources, because I know I don't do enough background work. So you've inspired me. Thank you.
Well, it just, as I said, I get people come in and, they've got Portuguese ancestors, and I've never dealt with, and I can do Scottish and Irish research in my sleep. I can do Massachusetts research, probably if I'm under anesthesia at this point, but nobody is an expert in it all. If I got somebody who I was helping with Virginia records, I've told you guys, I start people with the census, and one reason I start people with the census is it's the same for all the US. And as they look for their ancestors in the census, it gives me time to go do this and figure out where to send them next. So just something to be aware of, that there are resources out there. Don't feel like you need to, just flounder without help. And I'm not saying, and don't take this as I'm not going to help you. You need to do it all yourself, because a second pair of eyes is really helpful. And I'm more than happy to handhold if you feel like you need it. But I also, a lot of what I want to do with this is empower you guys to do your own, because the research is the fun part. Oops. Sorry, I was talking and didn't notice where he was headed. He is so happy that I'm home all the time. It's funny.
BJ, I have another question.
Sure.
I'm finding these Zoom sessions with you very, very helpful, and I really appreciate it. I'm wondering if it's giving me courage to do things that I've been hesitant to do. I'm just curious to know, will there in the future be any kind of or is there a place to get some technical support, simple things about, well, that aren't simple to me. How do you get a photograph and include it into your genealogy? How do you take from ancestry and put it somewhere?
I can put that on my list of things to do.
Okay, I'm kind of hesitant to start. My sister-in-law was a huge genealogist. In fact, she helped put these diocesan records together. She had on my husband's side, she had something like 50,000 something names. I mean, it was amazing what she's done. But I don't have that ability, and she's not with us anymore. And so
Well, that's one reason I'm doing the Monday at 1:00 ones
okay,
that are going to be more of the technological stuff.
okay, wonderful.
So I will add that to the list of, and some of these, I may not do them every week after the library reopens, but if when I'm getting 30 people come to something, ooh, no, I know you want attention. That's not the way to get it, Scout. I may well keep doing some of these afterward, after we reopen, just because in some ways it's easier on like the technology stuff for you to be sitting at home at your computer and kind of playing along. Yeah.
And is it worth subscribing to the newspapers.org or .com, whatever it is?
It depends. I mean, the answer on all of these is it's worth subscribing if you find the record you want.
Okay.
And most of them have either a free trial or you can buy a month's subscription.
Okay.
And just make sure you cancel it before the month, and so I do that. I pop in and I'll do a month at newspapers.com once or twice a year. And then the next month I might do Genealogy Bank. Right now I've got Find My Past because I'm working on some English stuff. And they've got a lot of the English parish registers that aren't anywhere else. So that's my thing is, in fact, one reason I had a personal MyHeritage subscription for a year because I won it at NERC last year, whereas they're one of the few that you have to, at least last time I looked, you had to buy a whole year at a time. And I tend not to do that. I like to be able to turn them on and off as I go. So, but I will add that to my postcard of adding photos.
When you post these things, all this chatting that goes on, does that get saved too somewhere for us to go back and read? Like, okay.
Yes. So, okay, so at this point, I'm going to stop the recording.